If you're in the market for a premium electric car with a budget of around 50 lakh rupees, these are probably your top choices. The Ioniq 5, which has been our car of the year, retro looking, lots to talk about. Then you have the BMW iX1 in long wheelbase, guys, so lots of space and the most car-like here. And then of course the latest one, the BYD Sealion 7. It does things in a very modern way, but today we're going to find out which one of these is the one for you.
और अगर आप इस वीडियो को हिंदी में देखना पसंद करेंगे तो हमारे Autocar India YouTube चैनल पर देख सकते हैं।
In terms of design, the three EVs here all follow a different form factor. The Ioniq 5 features a concept car-like neo-retro look with a unique design that gets a lot of straight lines and creases. What also add to the drama are 20-inch wheels that are the biggest ones in this company, and also a 3-meter wheelbase, which is the longest too. If it is attention you seek and like the whole old world charm meets new age tech, the Ioniq 5 will fit the bill. The BYD Sealion 7 features a more mature design with curves and lines that blend into the body. The coupe SUV shape, thanks to a tapering roof, looks sporty, and the flush-fitting door handles with its simple lines adds elegance. It is also the longest and widest EV here, and just a shade behind the Ioniq in terms of wheelbase. The 20-inch wheels look sharp, and so does the split spoiler, and the overall stance is very well proportioned. In this company, the iX1 does fall short of drama. It clearly is an ICE to EV conversion and not a born electric, which means you need to look closer to see its EV exclusive bits. The front gets a closed off grille with a typical BMW front end. Despite the iX1 being the long wheelbase version, it gets the smallest wheelbase in this comparison. And even in terms of the width, the iX1 lags behind. What does work in its favor is a familiar look and a more upright silhouette, giving it that typical SUV design. In terms of ground clearance, the BMW comes out on top with 175 mm, while the Sealion 7 stands at 170 mm and the Ioniq 5 with 163 mm. Clearly, there won't be any sitting on the fence with these EVs as all have a different character, but if you think the interior will help you decide, you'd be wrong. They all play a different game here as well.
Now the Sealion 7 is by far the best in terms of interior, just the amount of quality and the fit finish levels are excellent. It has even beaten BMW, which is a tall order anyway, but they've managed to do that because of the use of so much soft touch materials, so much padding. Everything you touch is nice and plush, and you have this open stitching as well that looks very modern. The seats are very comfortable, plush, very well cushioned, so that's an added plus as well. And the overall layout is very sleek and minimalistic. Of course, the downside to that is a lot of the button switches are all crammed inside this touchscreen. A very big touchscreen, but it still is something that you need to be wary of, because if this thing goes off, then things are not going to look good because there simply is no other control. Low down on the center console, you do get your basic stuff like the fan speed and start stop, your regen functions, all very handy and all finished with this nice knurled material for the buttons and switches. Very upmarket and premium. Below that you have the two cup holders which can be adjusted for height as well. So if you want a deeper cup holder, then that is an option here too. You have two phone pads up here. One is just a tray and the other one is a 50-watt wireless charger that gets individual cooling as well, because you know wireless chargers tend to heat up the phones. And overall, the steering wheel, again, flat bottom, this lovely brushed metallic look to it, and it just doesn't feel like a car that is priced around these other cars, because in this comparison, it is just blowing away the competition. Now, while the fit finish and quality and materials are very good, there are some basics that you just miss out on this car. The first is the ease with which you can control the UX UI. The touchscreen is far too complicated. There's just too much happening in there for you to know exactly what to do immediately. Then you have the instrument cluster, which is even more cramped. It's smaller in size and it has a lot more data. So when you're looking into it, it just goes haywire. You're just confused as to what exactly is happening. Steering buttons, nice and convenient, that's all right. And then you have the seats, very comfortable. You have a good amount of adjust as well. You get massaging as an option. You also get ventilation for both front seats, so that's an added plus. And overall, the interior is that of a very high-end car. And that is, I think, going to be the biggest draw for the Sealion 7. In this comparison, it definitely stands up right at the top. Now, the Ioniq 5, the oldest car here, but also the most quirky and futuristic, because this dashboard layout is pretty much unseen on any car. You have this steering wheel that is really nice in terms of finish. The overall quality levels are very high. However, the problem with this nice bright upholstery is that it is very difficult to maintain. As you can see, the staining has started. It has started to show the dirt and the muck all over the place. So maintaining it is a bit of an issue.
However, Hyundai does provide an option with dark interiors that will be a lot easier to look after.
But apart from that, in terms of just being out there and being wild and different, nothing really beats the Ioniq 5. Even the Hyundai logo is a Morse code and not the typical H that you see on some other cars. The two screens are very straightforward. You have two 12.3-inch units. Very slick, very easy to use, and that I think is the big highlight. And low down, behold, you have physical buttons. Now, of course, the AC control and the climate are still on a haptic pad, so that still is a bit different compared to what we like with the physical tactile buttons, but it's still better than going through menus and sub menus inside the touchscreen. So this is definitely more user friendly. Even the instrument cluster, very clean and simple. You see exactly what you need to see. All the information is neatly laid out, so that's a good touch as well. And coming to the seat comfort, it is extremely good. Broad seats, very well cushioned, and plenty of adjustment. You have extra bit of under thigh support as well, so that's an added plus. You have boss mode for this front seat, so you can move this seat up ahead and behind and just add more space into the back. So a few quirks on this Ioniq 5 are this open area in the center, so in case you don't have enough space to get out of this side, all you need to do is just scoot over to the passenger seat and get out the door. I'm sure this is not meant for that, but you can use it in those instances. A wireless charging pad right here with some storage space. You have two USB-A ports. You have a center armrest as well that can be opened for more storage. The glove box has a decent amount of storage as well. You have this cubby hole down here with another USB port. So practicality wise, it is absolutely loaded, and just the overall interior and the feel is very much there. So in terms of plushness, I think it's not as plush as the BYD, but in terms of space and practicality, definitely up there. Now the interior on the iX1 definitely premium. You have a lot of high quality materials, but it is a snug fit. You immediately feel the lack of width once you get into the car, especially after the other two. So clearly it's not as wide, but then you also have the seats that are quite narrow as well. So if you're a large frame adult, these squabs won't be enough, and even the bolsters will sort of get you by the body. The good thing is that the fit finish is excellent like you expect on BMW. So all the materials, all the buttons are very tactile and nice to the touch, but you don't have the plushness that you have with the BYD, and it still feels a bit on the sportier side than the luxurious side. Speaking of which, you have this dark brown mocha interior which looks really nice. Lot easier to maintain than the Ioniq 5's bright upholstery, so that's a good touch. You have the floating center console which gets your basic functions and modes, and then you have the big curved display with the iDrive in there. Now the BMW iDrive in its latest avatar is far too complicated. There's just too much stuff going on. Everything including the AC functions are crammed in there like we saw on the BYD as well. So yes, that is a bit cumbersome. And then you have the instrument cluster which is very clean and clear, so very easy to read. You have this center console which has two cup holders. You have a massive charging pad as well, two Type-C ports, a lot of storage space below the armrest. So in terms of storage options, not a bad place at all. And just the overall position is that of a car and not an SUV. So very car-like to sit in, very sporty, chunky steering wheel that is nice to the touch, very good to hold as well. So overall, if you're someone who enjoys being in the driver's seat, then position-wise, this is perfect. But yes, you will miss out on the goodies that you get on the Ioniq or even the BYD Sealion, because ventilated seats are not there on this. They are there on both those cars. And then you have some other features that are not available on the iX1 as well. In fact, we'll just put up a slate right now that shows you all the differences in terms of the features.
In the equipment competition, the BYD comes out on top, with the Ioniq coming in at second place and BMW trailing behind. But can this change in terms of the rear seat space and comfort?
Now in the backseat of the Sealion 7, space is not really an issue. Yes, the wheelbase is not the longest in this comparison, but you still get a lot of knee room, and you are not seated as knees up as you do on some of the other cars. So seats again, very, very comfortable. The cushioning is just superb. And of course, you have a recline as well. So a good, comfortable space. Big glass roof which brings in a lot of light and just opens up the cabin. You have big windows as well. Now sadly they do miss out on blinds. That would have been a perfect touch.
However, the rear windows do get a tint to counter the missing blinds, and BYD say it complies with the legal norms too.
But overall, the positioning of the armrest and just the positioning of the seat and the shoulder line is just perfect. Doesn't feel claustrophobic or cramped. You have a center armrest as well with 2 cup holders. There is some space in here for small items, knickknacks. So very well appointed cabin. Now you don't get AC controls for the rear, so you only have blowers. You can't really do anything on your own. And if you open this, you get 2 USB ports, a USB-A and a Type-C port as well. So in terms of backseat comfort, very good, and all that is thanks to the seat. And in terms of cabin width as well, you can easily seat 3 passengers here. The floor is nice and flat, as you can see, and the center seat is not too elevated, so it won't really be uncomfortable. Yes, the backrest of this middle passenger won't be as comfortable, but overall it's definitely usable. You get your individual headrest, you get individual seat belts, 3-point seat belts as well. Obviously you expect that in a car at this price point. So the back seat experience is very good on the Sealion 7. Now in this comparison with a 3-meter wheelbase, this by far is the most spacious legroom, at least on paper. So knee room definitely not a problem. However, it is not as comfortable as the Sealion 7, because as you can see, despite having a lot of room, I am seated slightly knees up. The floor is slightly high. Yes, like the Sealion, it is flat as well. So 3 passengers will be very comfortable in the back, but it still isn't as comfortable, and the seats just don't feel as plush. However, you do get sun blinds. That's a big plus. You get a nice big panoramic sunroof as well. Sorry, a glass roof which cannot be opened. So that does bring a lot of light, and that just opens up this already bright cabin. AC vents are also there in the pillars, so better placement I feel, because cooling is a lot more effective. And just the overall sense of space is really nice. The theatrical position, you are seated nice and high, so you get a good view out. That's good, but it's only the under thigh support that is slightly missing on this car. Otherwise, this would have been an absolutely perfect seat. Now in the backseat of the iX1, this being the long wheelbase version, you don't struggle for space at all. Yes, in this comparison, this has the shortest wheelbase, but as you can see, that's really not a point to complain. What is the point to complain though is that the floor is quite too high and the squabs are limited. So you have a bit of a knees up seating position, and that's not comfortable, especially if you have long legs. What's also a bit of a downer is this backrest that is firm in terms of cushioning, so not the comfiest place to be, and over a long drive this firmness could really hurt. You get a center armrest with 2 cup holders. You get a nice flattish floor. You have a bit of a tunnel in the center for the middle passenger. AC vents, 2 Type-C ports, a big glass roof like we do on the other cars as well. And here too, the long windows don't get sun blind, so that is again a bit of a miss. Overall quality levels are very good, and if you don't mind the lack of under thigh support, then the space is not going to be a problem. However, in this comparison, it does show up and it does highlight itself. So backseat experience, not the best. Definitely the Sealion 7 is the top choice there.
Boot space wise, it is the Ioniq 5 that aces ahead with a 520 litre boot, with the Sealion 7 following at 500 litres and the iX1 with 490 litres. However, since the Ioniq 5 and Sealion 7 are both born electrics, there is a decent sized frunk available on them as well, with the Sealion featuring the most space. The BMW sadly gets no frunk. All 3 EVs are reasonably practical and quite tech loaded, but what about the experience from behind the wheel? All 3 featured here have different drive layouts, with the Sealion 7 getting an all-wheel drive, the Ioniq 5 a rear-wheel drive, and rather unconventionally, it is the BMW that is front-wheel drive. Also in terms of the battery chemistry, the Ioniq 5 and iX1 use NMC cells, while the BYD gets LFP cells. Let's start with the most powerful of the lot, the BYD Sealion 7.
Alright, into the BYD Sealion 7 now. 82.5 kilowatt-hour battery pack, dual motor layout, pushing out 530 horsepower and 619 Newton meters. That's more than both of those cars combined, and the performance, oh my god. That instant acceleration is just savage, and if you want a big practical everyday car to do regular drag races, then it doesn't get better than this. 0 to 100 is a claimed 4.5 seconds, but in our testing we found out that it was slightly quicker. And it just is unbelievable, the performance. There are drive modes, of course, between Eco, Normal, Sport, and there's also one called Snow, which I believe will play with the electronics and control the amount of power that goes through. But even in normal, this thing is rapid. And it's not like the focus is just on performance. While that is a key highlight, a lot of the car is about luxury and performance and comfort. And as a result, refinement is also very nice.
While it is quick off the line, it is also able to put its power down in a tidy manner thanks to the all-wheel drive system. On the move, it is smooth and progressive, and while the powertrain is silent, you will start to hear more of the outside world as you creep closer to the 3-digit speeds, despite it featuring double-glazed front windows.
The steering is nice and light, very convenient in the city, and put it into sport, it gains a bit of weight as well. Of course, not as communicative as the BMW maybe, but it still is pretty good. What you will feel though, in the corners especially, is a bit of body roll. And once the road gets bumpy, there is a good amount of movement as well. It's not bad, but it's definitely not as sure-footed as the Ioniq 5 and not as planted as the iX1. So enthusiast driving, it may not be the best, but drive it sedately, calmly for a nice cruise, and it's very hard to fault.
That said, there is a lot to take in while driving it.
And then you have the instrument cluster, which is giving back so much information that it is really hard to process. You can only look at so many things, what's happening in the screen, what's happening in the heads-up display, what's happening in the instrument cluster, and the moment you start dwindling your eyes here and there, you have that detection, that fatigue detection system that just constantly scans your face, and even if you take your eyes off for a bit, it'll start chiming, it'll start warning you, keep your eyes on the road. Now that is a good feature, good for safety, but it is annoying, especially when the car itself makes you look elsewhere so many times. ADAS is part of the BYD Sealion 7 as well, and yes, it is decently calibrated. You have a lot of data again. You can see exactly what you're overtaking, what's in front of you, the type of vehicle. It ranges from a motorcycle rider to a car or a truck. So very accurate in that sense. What I'd rather like is a bit more fine-tuning for the ADAS calibration. The good bit, like on the Ioniq 5, is that you can turn the systems off manually. Just have to fiddle about in this massive touchscreen, and then it's a lot easier.
The Hyundai Ioniq 5 may not have as much power, but it sure can hold its own.
Alright, into the second most powerful car in this comparison, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 gets a 72.6 kWh battery pack, and power stands at 217 horsepower with 315 Newton meters. Now it's a big heavy car, but it is still lighter, around 300 kgs lighter than the BYD Sealion 7. So performance is not something that you will complain about, because while it may not have that neck snapping reaction of the Sealion, it still is pretty adequate. And progress is quick. Of course, you get drive modes as well between Eco, Normal and Sport, and they obviously change the characteristics. So Sport will give you that necessary EV-like instant reaction. Normal is a bit subdued, and Eco obviously will dial down the power. But what's really nice is that the motor is at the rear. It's a rear-wheel drive car. So on the hills, going uphill especially, you won't really struggle for grip. That torque steer that we experience with the BMWs is not really there. And speaking on the Regen, this gets 4 levels. And by far between the three, this has the best and the most accurate Regen system out there. It's natural, it doesn't catch you off guard. And that I think is a win.
The throttle modulation has been judged very well, and it feels like a normal ICE car to drive. What's also nice is that suspension noises as well as road and tire noises barely break the silence of the cabin.
Now in the corners, this is not really an agile car. Of course, there's a lot of weight that it's lugging around, but the steering is light, and in the city, it is very convenient to use. Of course, as the modes change, the steering weight changes as well, but it remains a calm and sedate car to drive. And on the topic of ADAS, now ADAS usually is very good on Hyundais, and on the Ioniq 5 it's no different. You can turn off the ADAS features one by one, and that obviously gives you a lot more control, so that's nice. But even the basic calibration is done very well. That said, where the Ioniq 5 really aces is in the ride comfort and the cruising. The suspension tune is very nice. It softens these harsh puddles and potholes, and at speed it is nice and stable as well. A really well sorted ride. And that is something you can't say about a lot of EVs, because they're heavy low down, so they have that inherent bumpy character. But on this one, the tune is just perfect. The setup is really nice.
And as a result, it is effortless to drive over long distances. So what does the BMW have in its artillery?
Now on paper, this might be the least powerful car with 204 horsepower and 250 Newton meters from that 66 and a something kilowatt hour battery pack, but it still drives like a BMW. Almost instantly you feel that this car is just made by people who like driving. It drives almost like an ICE car, and that has to do with the way the power is delivered. Very linear and none of that shock that you expect from EVs. It's all instant, it's all there, but just the way the throttle is set up, you can gradually squeeze it and it will gain pace. And into the corners, the steering calibration is just spot on. Of course, it gains a fair bit of heft once you change into the sportier setting, but even as is, because it is not as wide as the other cars and just not as big in size, it is very, very nimble. The 204 horsepower might seem less for this car, but honestly, it's not making that much of a difference. Of course, compared to the Sealion, you'll obviously feel it because it's more than half the power. But even as is in isolation, this thing is very, very good. It's already up to triple digit speeds, and there is just no space or no point where I'm thinking, it needs a bit more power.
That said, being front wheel drive, there is some torque steer when driven flat out, and as for sound insulation, it isn't as quiet on the move as the Ioniq, but does better than the Sealion 7.
Now coming to the Regen, the iX1 also gets something called the adaptive regen, which means the car figures out on its own how much regen you need depending on the speed, depending on the car in front. And honestly, the system is not the best. Calibration wise, it's not ideal or smooth. And if you want to change that regen settings, it's not like you have paddle shifters that can instantly do it, or a knob right here which you can just move about and play with the settings. You have to go into the screen, into the menu, and then change the whole setting. It's just a lot more cumbersome and not natural. And that's the whole thing about this whole iDrive system. Everything is fed in there, and that does pose a problem sometimes.
Performance is well and good, but arguably what matters most in EVs is the range. In our real world range test, the Ioniq 5 came out on top with a calculated overall range of 457 kilometers, which is significantly higher than the other two. The iX1 long wheelbase meanwhile has a 398 kilometer range, and rather surprisingly, the BYD has the least range at 371 kilometers. And as is the case with most EVs, all three here were more efficient in the city cycle, where they can recuperate more energy.
So what's the verdict? Well, you have the BMW iX1 first in long wheelbase, guys. If you have liking for the brand value and if you want the BMW badge at 49 lakh rupees, this is incredible value. But yes, it is going to be a compromise when it comes to space, when it comes to a few features as well, and of course the range. The BYD Sealion 7, now performance is in its name. The badge literally says 4.5. So if you want rapid performance, then this is definitely something to look for. But that's not all. The interior and the lux factor is definitely high up there, and it's also nice and comfortable with a lot of features. What doesn't work in its favor though is the range, and that it is the most expensive here. On that front, the Ioniq 5 makes a lot of sense. It has the most range here, and it is the least expensive, and it does not feel like a car that has sacrificed features or any form of premiumness. It does a lot of things right. It is a well-rounded package, and for that reason, it is the winner of this comparison.